Welcome, everyone. It's so good to have each and every one of you here. I'm so pleased that we get to sit in a room and dream kingdom dreams together. And our hope tonight is that together we might catch hold of the kingdom possibilities for this new ministry centre. One of my favourite chapters in the Bible is Hebrews 11, and the opening words in that chapter is faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you cannot see. Hebrews 11 goes on to commend person after person throughout the Old Testament for their faith. In each instance, those who were commended had to trust God for something that had not yet come into being, something that was in the future still. Things that often, as I read them from a human perspective, probably seemed impossible or unlikely. And in isolation, when you read Hebrews 11, there's this, it kind of feels like very random stories about weird and wonderful things. But it's collectively, as we get to read it with the benefit of hindsight, that we actually see all the way through the Old Testament that God was weaving this kingdom plan to bring many to the Father through Jesus Christ. And so all these stories make sense in hindsight. There's so much benefit in seeing God's plan with hindsight, is there not? But I'm conscious that each of the people in Hebrews 11 actually didn't have the benefit of hindsight when they were doing their little piece of the puzzle. They didn't know how it was all going to pan out. All they had was a conviction from God to step out in faith. They couldn't see how it was going to work, and yet they chose to trust God and to participate in the things that God called them to. So I'm not suggesting that building a new ministry centre is akin to building an ark, as is mentioned in Hebrews 11, but I am conscious that for all the steps that have been taken for our 173-year history as a church, that at times big steps have been taken that required faith and courage. And I believe right now in our church's life that we're at another one of those junctions. The steps that we are taking right now as a church do require faith. They require us to trust God and to participate in the things that He is doing. And so we want to see His kingdom plans come to fruition. We want to be able to stand in years to come and look back and go, wow, look at all the things that God was able to do because we didn't shrink back from having the faith to go where He called us to go.
Yeah, so where is God calling us to go? What are the plans that God has set before PBC? I wish I knew all the answers to that question. What are His plans for us as the global church? There are a lot of things actually that God actually reveals to us. Whilst the specific plans of what is to be worked out may not be known at this time, we step forward in faith knowing that God is actually going to lead us, and He is revealing the plan that He's calling us into, as we want to see lives being transformed because that lines up with the heart of our Father. And when Jesus stood up at the temple and He opened the scroll, He read the words of Isaiah, the prophecy about Him. The Spirit is on Him, has anointed Him to preach good news, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour, to set the captive, the oppressed free. These things is the heart of God, and the heart of God is still active and alive today. And that goes well beyond PBC. We know that. We're not so self-conceited to say that God's plan is just for us, and thank God it's not. But the manifestation, the realization of God's plan in this context is going to be unique because God is going to play out a story here in this context that is different to churches down the road and churches around our globe. In this context, I'm excited to see what it is, knowing what it has been, knowing that up on the wall we see just a visual representation of the story that God is weaving. Like, we don't necessarily know all the ins and outs that's gone up there, but what we do know is that God is transforming lives. He's restoring people who are coming to him broken. He's healing hurt. He's bringing people to life. And there's wonderful rejoicing and worship that spills out from us in response to that. So what's God doing? All of that and so much more. I wonder what portion you've actually seen of the kingdom coming in this place. And I wonder how we're going to continue to see the kingdom come.
So, can a new ministry centre transform lives? The answer is no. That's the work of ministry, which is done by people. And yet the ministry role, the ministry centre shouldn't just be seen as something that's not important, because it is a facility that will give us additional space, so around about 200 square metres of additional space, but also a flexible space as well. What we're wanting to design and see come into place is something that we foresee will benefit the next generation and beyond. So something that will last for 40 to 50 years and serve the needs of this church as we continue to grow, as we continue to move forward. And so I'm really looking forward to tonight because it's really different from a church meeting in a whole lot of ways. And a few weeks ago, we took you through a whirlwind tour of the new facility. What we get to do tonight is actually go through it quite slowly. So it's almost like we're going to go for a walk through it rather than flying through it. And in doing that, we really want to pause at times and actually think about the kingdom possibilities of what this could be. It may be for the immediate, but remember, we're not just building for what we need now, we're also building for the generations to come. We're building not for the lives that will be transformed this year or next year, but building for the lives that will be transformed in the future as well. And so what we want is something that is flexible, something that does give us that greater capacity to have the people that we have now, but also have a view to the future as well. So we're going to do a really slow walkthrough.
The new ministry centre will provide much needed additional space for a number of ministries that are occurring throughout the week. It will provide a large gathering space that connects out to the outdoors. As well as to several smaller breakout spaces, and that large gathering space can seat 80 to 120 people. The new ministry centre will also provide, on a mezzanine level upstairs, accessed via a lift, new office spaces and open plan spaces for our paid and volunteer staff. The new ministry centre will be physically connected with all-weather access to the existing church auditorium, have new landscaping whilst also retaining that secure play space for where young kids can be retained throughout ministries through the week, and keeping much of that green space in the centre of our site, recognising that we don't have a lot of green space at all. Additionally, the new ministry centre will see the car park get amended so that cars can move around in a smoother way, as well as separating more cleanly the interaction between cars and pedestrians, particularly as people move between the buildings across the site. In addition, the car park will see a brand new separated entry and exit onto Kleins Road.
what is our part? What can we do now to lean in and say, that's really exciting, but we're trying to move things forward? And I've got 4 things to say, and I kind of forced the alphabet a little bit to help me say, what is my part? P-A-R-T, all right? Just because it is 8:30 at night and it just helps remember some stuff. So the P part of what we're going to be asking everyone here to do is to pray. In Matthew 16, Jesus is speaking and says, I will build my church and the powers of hell will not conquer it. I will build my church, says Jesus. We need to be diligent. We need to be sacrificial and thankful because Jesus is choosing to work through us. But we also need to remember that the church is his body and he wants it to be healthy and thriving and growing and moving into the possibilities that we're looking at here. So we might think the New Ministry Centre is our project, and it is, but before it was our project, it actually was already his project. So we pray so that we seek him, and we seek his heart, and we seek his wisdom, and we seek his timing, and we seek his vision, and we seek his will for how we contribute as a church and how we contribute as individuals. And I know probably people don't need a seminar on why do we need to pray, but specifically for this, we're seeking to play our role in Jesus building his body. So we want to align ourselves. The second thing, the A of part, is we need to advocate. I'm doing a quick head count. Maybe there's 70 to 80 of us here tonight in a church of 800 people, and I want to thank you for coming out tonight. So we're privileged to get the information that we're getting and the access to kind of understanding what can be done with this church. But I guess I'm hoping that we as a group walk away with some level of shared mandate and shared challenge, if you like, to advocate on behalf of this New Ministry Centre, for us to be able to really speak on behalf of it, both in terms of its role. As Steve said, the building won't transform lives, but it plays a role in creating a place for lives and families and communities to be transformed, but also to advocate in our role. Well, our role for us here is to help those that are not here tonight to catch a bit of a sight, a bit of a vision of what the kingdom possibilities are and how they need to participate. Over the last couple of years, I've been an advocate for aged and unwell parents when they've been in hospital and when they've been in care. And I've found that an advocate needs to speak on behalf of, and they need to ensure that they're not forgotten or taken for granted, and they need to correct inaccurate assumptions or incorrect information. So I'm hoping tonight all of us have been able to see enough and talk about enough and get excited enough that we can get the vision and the passion and the need for the New Ministry Centre, so each of us can be that kind of advocate that we can speak on behalf of, that we can ensure that it's not taken for granted or sort of pushed to the back, and that we can correct any incorrect assumptions that actually might be coming up around us. To help with that, there's a couple of things I just wanted to mention. In a couple of weeks' time, there will be 2 additional kind of conversation starter resources that will be available. One will be out in the foyer there. There'll be on the wall, we're going to have a New Ministry Centre display set up so that people actually can kind of touch and engage some of what we've been talking about. And there'll also be a New Ministry Centre page set up on the PBC website. All right, 2 down. So PAR, the R is to raise funds. Now, the further I got, the less really accurate the alphabet was, but I got to PA and I wanted to make it spell part. So, raise funds. Firstly, we need to say a big thank you for those that are already giving. We've raised $868,000 already, and that represents real sacrifice and real generosity from many in our church, $868,000. But before we start construction, we aim to raise 1/3 of the total cost. Now, that will serve a couple of purposes. It will serve as a deposit so that it'll help us secure a loan, and it'll also make our ongoing loan repayments more affordable. So in percentage terms, we want to get to 33%, and that 868 gets us to around about 20%. So we're not there yet. But once we raise the 1/3, we then need to start repaying the loan on the remaining 2/3, the remaining 67%. Those repayments will be non-trivial, and they'll be above and beyond what we currently spend. I know many of us will have heard Ian's finance report in the church meetings and taken away from that we know this is a responsibly managed church. We know that we don't spend beyond our capacity. In broad terms, at the moment, our weekly giving is just above $16,000 a week, I believe, and our weekly expenses are just above $16,000 a week. Once we start building and we have a loan, our regular ongoing loan repayments will need to come from somewhere, and they'll need to come from somewhere that's not currently happening at the moment. So we'll need to step into that. So when you take all that together, but we still need to reach the 1/3, and then when we reach the 1/3, we need to be able to make repayments. That does mean we'll require sacrificial giving. And that's not just a handful of households doing sacrificial giving and digging really deep, and others just doing what's comfortable. In my view, to do all of that, it will require, a groundswell across PBC of people saying, hey, I believe in what we're doing here. This is so exciting. I'm so bought in. I can see how this is us stepping into our future, and then digging deep and sincerely asking themselves, well, what am I able to give? Do I need to deny myself something to make room for giving to the new ministry centre? It's easy for that to sound like an obsession with we need to get numbers and dollars, but it actually is more a spiritual journey for us collectively than it is a numerical or a dollars journey. And so we don't want to lose sight of that we know God doesn't measure generosity in dollars. He measures it in the level of sacrifice. And if you went to Luke 21, there's a story that many are familiar with where Jesus sees a poor widow put 2 coins in the temple treasury. And when he sees it, he turns to his disciples and said, this poor widow has put in more than all, for she, out of her poverty, put in all that she has. Because God knows circumstances. He knows my circumstances, he knows yours, and he honours whatever sacrifice actually looks like for each person. So that's what we're actually wanting to be able to lean into, is the genuine introspection, the genuine asking the question, well, what's God asking me to do? What am I able to do? Practically, there are several ways to give. One is if the money's there to make a one-off gift, and there is a giving button on the PBC website that actually helps with, what are the account numbers and all the relevant steps if you don't know that. The second option is to set up a regular ongoing contribution to the building fund. Thirdly, there's I'll call it circumstantial, which is there could be any number of circumstances that actually at a point in time allow you to contribute. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is that you might include in your will a gift towards the new ministry centre. Or however, if your point in the life cycle means that's probably not going to manifest during the window that we're looking at, you might think of something else. You might be at the other end of it. You might choose to donate a share of an inheritance that comes your way. You might choose to, when individual bonuses or things that come along that allow you to actually have additional financial freedom, you might be able to step in then. So irrespective of what all that is, this raise funds thing, what I'm asking is for us as a group here, the 70 or 80 here, to have our own personal question, but also to be able to amplify that to the rest of the church through the groups that we're in, through the different spheres of influence we may have. Because in addition to praying, in addition to being an advocate, we need to pray about our own personal contribution. What is it that God would ask us to give? My most questionable letter of the P-A-R-T was the T, which is thankfulness and celebration. So I'm just going to let you know that we've set aside in November, there'll be a fair bit of focus around giving and pledges. And you will all hear more about that when the time is drawing closer. But in the services in November, we're going to be celebrating what God has done already in PBC in the past. We're going to be celebrating what God is doing now at PBC. And we're going to be celebrating what God is going to do in the future in PBC. That'll then culminate on the 1st of December, which is a Sunday, which will be a Thanksgiving celebration, and that'll include where we've got to with raising funds for the new ministry centre and what it's going to enable us to do. But it won't be limited to that. It'll be a celebration of that kind of past, present and future. So kind of including the what's our part, how can we be part of what we're talking about now? I guess I'd ask that you just have those dates in mind to know there's a little bit of a crescendo going to happen as we build through the next few months. And in November, be ready to lean in during November, but in particular, if you can grab your calendar and clear and make sure that, if at all possible, on the 1st of December, we're believing that that's going to be a celebration. We're believing that's going to be a really significant milestone for us as a church to say, hey, look at us, we've ticked another box and we're ready to step into the era where the new ministry centre is becoming a reality. So that's how we can have our PART, our part.